thank you everyone for joining. And it's really nice because we're in Kartik, and today marks a very special Ekadashi, which is Uttana Ekadashi. And today also marks the beginning of the last 5 days of Kartik. Sometimes it's 4 days, but usually it's 5 days. And this year it's 5 days, which is called the Bhishma Panchak. And I know when Madan Prabhu and I were discussing about topics, Madan Prabhu had a specific topic in mind, which I won't share. But then my heart was pulling me towards talking about Bhishma Panchak because when I first got serious in Krishna consciousness, my first Kartik experience was during COVID. And when I heard about Bhishma Panchak and how glorious Bhishma Panchak is, I was like, I'm going to make a special endeavor for Bhishma Panchak. So I'd wake up early, chant rounds in the morning, which I didn't used to do before, and do as much as I could during the morning time, before the whole world wakes up, before I go to work or work from home in my room during COVID. And I was like, that was the best time in my spiritual life in terms of my nourishment, in terms of my progress. So I was like, my heart is just pulling me towards talking about Bhishma Panchak. So today I thought I would talk about Bhishma Panchak. And yeah, hopefully everybody sees and understands. Now, just looking at the names, looking at the altars, I suspect many of us know who Bhishma Dev is, at least from the Mahabharata pastimes. And Bhishma Dev is actually celebrated as a very great devotee, as many of us will know. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's described that there are 12 Mahajans. Swayambhur Narada Shambhu Kumara Kapilo Manu Pralado Janako Bhishmo Balir Veya Sakir Vayam. There are 12 Mahajans called Brahma, Narada, Shiva, the 4 Kumaras, Kapila, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, Yamaraj, and Bhishma Dev himself. A Mahajan is somebody who is described, or if we translate into English, is a great devotee. Somebody who is considered a great devotee, a great person. But another deeper understanding of a Mahajan is somebody who actually understands what is in the heart and mind of Krishna. Somebody who recognizes what Krishna's mission is at any moment in time. And so when we talk about Bhishma Dev being a Mahajan, we're also saying that Bhishma Dev understands the plan of Krishna. And yet Bhishma Dev fought against the Pandavas in the battle of Kurukshetra. What is the general plan of Krishna? We understand from Bhagavad Gita, many of us will know from the Mahabharata series, especially in the 1990s. Pritaranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. There are 3 things that Krishna really comes to this world for: to protect the devotees, to annihilate the miscreants, and Pritaranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanarthaya, to re-establish the principles of religion. And so Bhishma Dev understood that actually Krishna has come for one of the purposes, which is to annihilate the miscreants, to kill all the demons or the demoniac personalities. And so Bhishma Dev, for that very reason, he fought against the Pandavas and he fought on the Duryodhan side in the war. And for Bhishma, it didn't matter what the world would think. You know, when if we're thinking about doing something, we'll think 10, 100 times, what would people think? What will my neighbor think? What will my family think? What will everybody think? But Bhishma Dev, his thought was not, well, what will everyone else think? His thought was, what will please Krishna the most? He wasn't thinking about what people will say in the world. He was thinking about, will Krishna be happy with what I'm doing? Sometimes you may look around and think and question devotees because they're doing something bad, something wrong, something that in our eyes they shouldn't be doing. But here is Bhishma Dev fighting ready to kill those who are on Krishna's side. Each day on the battlefield, he'll be killing thousands and tens of thousands of warriors on Krishna's side. And yet he's celebrated as a Mahajan. But because his focus was only on what will please Krishna and what will Krishna think, that's what makes him a Mahajan. There's a great Acharya called Prabodhananda Saraswati, and he has a very nice quote, something that we can all learn from, meditate on, think about. He says, quote, "If the whole world glorifies me, but Krishna does not recognize me, then what is the use of that glorification? If the whole world spits at me, but Krishna recognizes me, then who cares about that spitting? What does it matter if anybody in the world or everybody in the world is against us if Krishna's on our side?" That's what Bhishma was thinking. And Bhishma, as we know, was such a strong, such an amazing and powerful warrior that actually before the war began, Vyasadeva had come to Dhritarashtra and guided him and was strongly encouraging him, don't let your children fight, don't let Duryodhana fight, stop the war, stop the war. But Dhritarashtra was like, no, no, no. My son should be my son should be the king. And so Vyasadeva, in the end, cutting the long story short, he basically said, okay, fine. You won't be able to go to the battlefield. I will leave Sanjaya, who is my disciple. I will give him divine vision so that he can recite and narrate and comment on what is happening at the battlefield whilst you are in the palace of Hastinapur. And so when the war was about to begin, Sanjaya came to Dhritarashtra and was offering, the war is about to begin, Maharaj. Would you like me to start narrating to you what's happening on the battlefield? And Dhritarashtra was so confident in Duryodhana's victory that he told Sanjaya that, no, I don't need to hear what's going on. In a few days' time, my son will return victorious. I will hear about his victory from him directly. I don't need to hear what is going on in the battlefield. Because Bhishma Dev is on his side. That Bhishma Dev who was trained, who was been educated in the art of warfare, in the scriptures, in the different arts, through personalities like Parshuram, through personalities like Shukracharya, Brihaspati, and so many people. That Bhishma Dev, who is such a strong warrior that he is over 400 years old and he's fought thousands and thousands of wars and battles, and not once has he ever been defeated. That Bhishma Dev, who has the boon to die at a time of his choosing, who in the world is able to conquer or defeat Bhishma Dev? Even Parshuram himself, Bhishma Dev had fought Parshuram and Parshuram could not come victorious. They had a truce, and Parshuram declared Bhishma Dev as the victor. And so Dhritarashtra was so confident in Duryodhana's victory off the back of Bhishma Dev being present. And yet, after 10 days, when Bhishma Dev falls, and that news spreads like wildfire, and it gets to the palace of Hastinapur, we hear that on the 10th day, Dhritarashtra goes to Sanjaya and says, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yutsava Mamaka Pandavascheva Kimma Kurvata Sanjaya. The Bhagavad Gita was not spoken in parallel to the war going on, moment to moment. Or, sorry, let me rephrase that. Sanjaya's recitation or narration of the Bhagavad Gita was not then. The Bhagavad Gita happened at the start of the war, but Sanjaya actually started narrating what was happening at the war on the battlefield 10 days later, after Bhishma Dev had left, or after Bhishma Dev had been had fallen to the ground, because Dhritarashtra was now in panic mode. That Bhishma Dev, who was undefeated, somehow was lying on a bed of arrows. But that was the power of Bhishma Dev, that the king, Dhritarashtra himself, had no issues, had no thought that somebody could ever defeat Bhishma Dev. And as soon as he had fallen, Dhritarashtra questioned what actually happened on the battlefield. And so, how does this happen? How is it that Bhishma Dev, who was such a great warrior, who was undefeated, falls on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? So many of us probably know the history of the Mahabharata and specific events that have taken place. But in a very quick snapshot, a few days into the Mahabharata war, Duryodhana comes to Bhishma Dev and starts chastising him. He starts calling him different things and saying that, oh, Bhishma Dev, you're fighting on our side, on the side of the Kauravas, and yet you are siding with the Pandavas. Instead of fighting with your full strength, you are going easy because the Pandavas are your favorite, because Arjuna is on their side. And Bhishma Dev, being such a noble warrior, he couldn't take this. He couldn't take that insult. And so he had chanted some mantras and 5 arrows and promised to Duryodhana that actually, I will use these 5 arrows and defeat and kill the Pandavas with them. And somehow or another, Duryodhana took care of the 5 arrows, but Krishna, through his trickery, he had the 5 arrows taken away. And a few different things happened also where Bhishma Dev had given a boon to Draupadi by mistake, a boon whereby, may your husband be victorious. And having all of these experiences, Bhishma Dev then vowed, he made a very strong vow. He vowed that either I will kill Arjuna or I will force Krishna to break his promise. And what was Krishna's vow? Krishna had vowed that he would never pick up a weapon in the battle of Kurukshetra. So there was Bhishma Dev, who had vowed to kill the Pandavas, but Krishna, through his trickery, had taken the arrows away. There was Bhishma Dev, who was endeavoring to make Duryodhana victorious and grant the boon of victory to Duryodhana's wife. But there, Krishna's trickery, he sent Draupadi, and Draupadi was given the boon that may her husbands be victorious. And now here is Bhishma Dev with his 3rd vow. Either Arjuna will be killed or Krishna will be forced to break his promise. And so we see then on the 10th day of the Battle of Kurukshetra, for the first time in the whole Kurukshetra war, Arjun and Bhishma are face to face. They're shooting arrows at each other, threatening to kill each other, and Bhishma Dev is not holding back one bit. It's described in the Mahabharata that actually Arjun, for the whole 18 days of the Mahabharata war, he did not sweat once when he was fighting. And yet in this fight, in this battle against Bhishma Dev, he was sweating and sweating and sweating because he was at his limit and beyond. And of course, he was not ready to kill his grandfather Bhishma Dev, but Bhishma Dev was ready to kill Arjuna. And despite Krishna encouraging and requesting Arjuna to fight with all his strength, Arjuna couldn't do it. And so Krishna had to make the decision. Krishna was looking at Bhishma Dev's wrath. He was looking at Bhishma Dev's strong will to defeat Arjuna and kill Arjuna, and looking behind him at Arjuna and seeing his own half-hearted attempt at fighting the battle with Bhishma Dev. And so Krishna had to make the choice. Either let his devotee die or break his promise. And so Krishna jumps off of the chariot and starts running towards Bhishma Dev. And he finds on his path a broken chariot wheel. So he picks the chariot wheel up, and I'm sure many of us have seen the picture where Krishna is running towards Bhishma Dev with the chariot wheel. And Bhishma Dev, seeing Krishna run towards him, is just firing arrow after arrow after arrow, all hitting Krishna's chest. But still, Krishna is running and running. And when Arjun sees that Krishna is about to break his promise, he is breaking his promise and ready to pick up arms just to protect Arjuna. Arjun starts running after Krishna and catches hold of Krishna's leg and is begging him, please, Krishna, remember your promise. Remember, you said you will not fight, you will not pick up arms in this battle. Please put the arms down. But Krishna, dragging Arjun with him, is going face to face with Bhishma because Bhishma was about to kill his dear devotee Arjun. And as soon as Krishna comes in very close proximity of Bhishma Dev, Bhishma Dev throws his bows and a bow and arrows and stretches its arms out wide as if surrendering. And he calls out to Krishna, hey Keshava, this is exactly what I wanted to see. Come. And then he stretches his arms out. Come, attack me, kill me. Then my life will be perfect. And as soon as Krishna sees and hears this, he smiles. And he tells Arjuna, pick up your bow and arrows and fight and kill Bhishma Dev. We see that Bhishma Dev was such a devotee that he forced Krishna to break his vow. Krishna is actually always looking out for his devotees. In this case, he had to protect one devotee by protecting his life, and he had to protect the other devotee by protecting his vow. On the one side, he had Arjuna, who he wanted to protect because Arjuna was crucial for Krishna's plan in the war. On the other side, he had Bhishma Dev, who was on the side of the enemy, but had vowed to either kill Arjuna or make Krishna break his promise. And for that reason, we see Krishna breaks his own vow, his own promise, in order to protect both of his devotees. Protect Arjuna's life and Bhishma Dev's words. And as we know, after this point, we see that Arjuna uses Shikhandi as a shield to then kill Bhishma, or not even kill Bhishma Dev, to fire many, many arrows onto Bhishma Dev's body. And Bhishma Dev is described in the Mahabharata again that it wasn't just 2-3 arrows, his entire body was covered with arrows, so much so that there wasn't even a space for a needle to strike his body. That's how many arrows Arjuna had shot at Bhishma Dev using Shikhandi as a shield. And thus we see Bhishma Dev falls on a bed of arrows. And he lies there for almost 2 months. It's described, I think, as 58 days. 58 days Bhishma Dev is lying on that bed of arrows. And just waiting for the opportune moment to leave. But shortly after the war ends, after Bhishma Dev's falling, Dronacharya takes up the commander-in-chief for Duryodhana. After he falls, Karna takes it up, and then another person takes it up. Like this, different commander-in-chiefs, and after 18 days of the war, the Pandavas reign victorious. But there's one person who is thinking about this whole massacre that had taken place and just couldn't tolerate it. Yudhishthira Maharaj, who has now reigned as king after winning the war of Kurukshetra, the battle of Mahabharat. He couldn't bear to tolerate the massacre that had taken place just to establish him as the king. He was thinking in his mind that Duryodhana, even though he was so cruel, he was administering the kingdom so nicely. And just for me to be on the kingdom, to be sitting on the throne, so many people gave up their lives. And so he goes to Vyasadeva, he goes to Krishna, he goes to different saintly personalities. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear Vyasadya Vyasyadyayar Ishvare Yajne Krishnad Bhuta Karmana Prabodhito Itihase Se Nabhutyeta Shucharpita. We hear King Yudhishthir, who was much aggrieved, could not be convinced despite instructions by great sages headed by Vyasa and the Lord Krishna himself, the performer of superhuman feats, and despite all historical evidence. Even though Yudhishthira Maharaj was being told by Krishna himself that, look, this is all according to plan, Yudhishthira Maharaj, his heart could not be pacified. And because Krishna wanted his dear devotee, Bhishma Dev, to be glorified, we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam in Mahabharata how Yudhishthira Maharaj then goes to the place of the Battle of Kurukshetra after the war has finished, and specifically goes to see the massacre, see all the dead bodies, and then come to Bhishma Dev. Yudhishthira Maharaj, the Pandavas, Krishna, so many other saintly personalities are assembled there. They're assembled and they see Bhishma Dev lying on that bed of arrows, not lamenting, not crying, not rolling in agony and pain, not questioning, why me? I'm such a great devotee. He's lying on the bed of arrows, asking Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas, how is everything? What's going on? He's looking at Krishna and glorifying Krishna in different ways, appreciating how everything moves according to the will of Krishna, how Krishna is in fact the goal of his own meditation. And then in different ways, he is instructing Yudhishthira Maharaj on how to practice his dharma, how to practice his duties in a spiritual way, how to look after the kingdom, not because Yudhishthira Maharaj is great, but because that's his duty towards Krishna. I'm narrating this whole episode of Bhishma Dev because this conversation between Bhishma Dev and Yudhishthira Maharaj is described to have taken place in a very magnanimous way. In the Mahabharata, it's described that just as they come, as the Pandavas, etc., come, Bhishma Dev tells Arjuna, I'm thirsty. And so Arjuna fires an arrow to the ground, and from the ground comes Ganga Devi, Ganga water, to quench Bhishma Dev's thirst. And from then until Bhishma Dev leaves his body, he does not eat or drink. All he does is glorify Krishna and instruct Yudhishthira Maharaj on how to rule the kingdom in a religious way. Bhishma Dev as a Mahajan and this pastime touches Krishna's heart so much that he actually offers so much respect to Bhishma Dev that in the scriptures, in the Puranas, specifically the Skanda Puran and Padma Puran, it's actually described that these 5 days, the last 5 days of Kartik, will be celebrated as Bhishma Panchak in honor of the austerity and the devotion that Bhishma Dev had towards Krishna, especially in his final days. And so that's why we see that the last 5 days of Kartik, this Bhishma Panchak, is described that one who actually performs austerities even more severe than that performed during Kartik. In the scriptures, is actually described different levels of fasting, which are even more severe and more intense than those of Kartik itself that you may have heard of already. Things to do with like for the 5 days, progressively only eating or only having products which are made from milk produce. So, like go, milk, etc., etc. So only having produce like that, or different levels of worship and eating, etc. But the essence of it we see is very much to make time for our purity, for our spiritual cultivation, and to really worship and focus on strengthening our spiritual practices. Yes, the whole Kartik month is for that, 100%. But these final 5 days of Kartik, sometimes we make a vow at the start of Kartik, and then as the weeks go by, they start getting more difficult. But the last 5 days of Kartik are there for us to rejuvenate our vows, for us to go the extra mile for Krishna during the month of Kartik, and to really honor Bhishma Dev and offer some of our service to Bhishma Dev in gratitude, in recognition and appreciation for Bhishma Dev's own austerities and devotion that he showed. How many of us could be lying on our deathbed thinking about Krishna, thinking about glorifying Krishna, thinking about doing some Krishna Katha? Very few, if any. And these 5 days of Bhishma Panchak are there for us to remember how great a personality Bhishma Dev is. And not to imitate Bhishma Dev, but to intensify our own austerities and practice, at least a little bit, kicking it up a couple of notches, just out of respect for Bhishma Dev and his devotional and dedication to Krishna. So I'll end there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada ki Jai.